Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, I want to talk about what the Maple Leafs may be prioritizing or what they should be in terms of their roster this offseason. The first thing that the Maple Leafs need to be prioritizing this offseason is their goaltending. They finished 27th in the NHL in terms of 5-on-5 save percentage, and out of all the teams that made the playoffs, that was the worst. The next closest team finished 19th, and that was the Edmonton Oilers. Now, goaltending isn't the only thing that factors into a team's save percentage, and if we're looking at the other defensive metrics, in terms of the shot attempts against, the actual shots against, the expected goals against, the scoring opportunities against, and the high danger shot attempts against, the Leafs compared to the rest of the teams in the NHL are slightly above average defensively. But I'm also not saying that the Maple Leafs don't need to improve defensively at all. I mean, if we're looking at how they rank against other teams who made the playoffs, so the lowest you can go here is 16th. Their goaltending, again, like we said earlier, was the worst among any playoff team. But in terms of the other metrics, they're about middle of the pack. And to be average at anything come playoff time, it'll hurt you. I'm also not blaming Jack Campbell for the reason why the Maple Leafs had the worst 5-on-5 save percentage out of any team to make the playoffs this year. If you're looking at the goalies who played games for them, there's about 36 games or so where guys like Eric Kallgren, Peter Mrazek, and Michael Hutchison played, where the Leafs got almost sub 900 goaltending, and that's at 5-on-5. You're not even factoring in the penalty kill at that point. And I've pointed this out before. If you're looking at Jack Campbell's numbers in these playoffs, he had an .898 save percentage, and that's not very good. But if you're looking at the goal save above expected here, it's about even, which means in terms of the quality and quantity of scoring opportunities that he faced, he wasn't the reason why they lost that series, but he could have been better. We did a video a couple of days ago looking at a rumor where Elliot Friedman suggested that the Leafs could be interested in Anaheim Ducks goalie John Gibson. And if you want to watch that video, I'll leave it linked above the screen, but I'm not 100% a fan of that idea. And we looked over some other options in that video as well, and I added a couple to the list here that were suggested in the comment section. And there isn't that slam dunk candidate available through either free agency or via trade, but there are some decent names. The last time the Maple Leafs acquired a goalie with the expectation that he would just be their number one was Frederik Andersen in the 2016 offseason. But when they acquired Freddie, he had already had somewhat of a track record with the Ducks. The last two seasons, he played 43 and 54 games, and he put up some decent results. He was primed to take over a starting job, and he needed a new contract as well. But if we're looking at this list of goalies here, I don't really see anyone who matches the credentials that Frederik Andersen came with. Guys like Eric Comrie and Ville Husso and Anthony Stolarz played well last year for their respective teams, and they're all 26, 27, and 28 years old, so they're in the prime of their careers. They're probably in a position to play more games, but at the same time, they don't come with that track record. All three of those goalies, beyond last season, don't really have much NHL experience. And just because they're not a slam dunk option doesn't mean that they're bad options. They're still coming off of good seasons. Now, the Leafs could bring Jack Campbell back, and I wouldn't be opposed to that. But if we're looking at his numbers over the last two seasons and comparing those to goalies who have signed contracts the last 2 years, he's in that same tier as Cal Petersen, who signed a $5 million deal for 3 seasons, Linus Ullmark, who signed for $5 million in 4 seasons, and Elvis Merzlikins, who signed for over $5 million in 5 years. I don't necessarily have a problem with the $5 million cap hit for Jack Campbell. I have a problem with the term. You know, a 3, 4, or 5 year deal, it's not even necessarily about his age. It's just the fact that in 2 years' time, the Maple Leafs are going to have to re-sign Auston Matthews and William Nylander, and the year after that, Mitch Marner. And I know that in 3 years' time, guys like John Tavares and Jake Muzzin and TJ Brody will be completely off the books. But at the same time, I want as much flexibility as the Leafs can possibly have so that they can navigate those off seasons and still remain competitive. What's on the screen right now are goalies who have played at least 50 games in the NHL over the last 2 years, and it's sorted by high danger save percentage at 5-on-5. And a high danger shot is basically point blank right in front of the blue paint. It can't get any more dangerous than that. And the guys who you would expect to be leaders in this stat over the last 2 years are basically there. You're seeing the top 13 names right now. And to find Jack Campbell on this list, we're going to have to scroll all the way down to 39th out of 43 guys. And it's not even because he's just facing so many of these high danger shots against that he can't keep up with them. In terms of the high danger shots against per 60 minutes, he's 34th out of 43 guys in this same sample. There's 38 guys who are stopping him at a better rate. If you don't think that Jack Campbell is the goalie of the now because of the numbers over the last 2 years, if you don't think that he's the goalie of the future because of his age and the injury history, I don't think it would be responsible to sign him to anything longer than a 1 or 2 year deal. And even if he would be willing to accept that, I think $5 million may be just a bit much. Now, because the Maple Leafs are more than likely going to be looking to move on from Peter Mrazek, they'll more than likely need to acquire 2 goalies this offseason. And if I had to narrow that list down from earlier, I would say that Semyon Varlamov from the New York Islanders is definitely in my top 3. Having goaltending depth is important, and Sorokin and Varlamov were an effective tandem for the Islanders last season, but with only $12 million in projected cap space and 3 defensemen under contract for next year, moving out Varlamov, who makes $5 million against the salary cap, who was their backup goaltender last year, could be an avenue they look to explore to retool or even improve their team. Goal save above expected tries to say how much better or worse a goalie is compared to the average in terms of the quality and quantity of scoring opportunities that they face and then stop. And even with the Islanders being a really good defensive team the last 3 years, Varlamov has found a way to have a positive impact in terms of that stat. Not just that, but he's also had some really good numbers in the playoffs the last couple of years for the Islanders, posting a .920 and a .923 save percentage. When you consider all of that and factor in that he only has 1 more year remaining on his deal, he could be an effective short-term solution for the Maple Leafs. If you're looking for a more in-depth breakdown of the names that we showed earlier on, I did a video a couple of days ago here on the channel doing just that. So I'll leave that video linked above the screen if you wanted to check that out after this one. The next thing that the Maple Leafs need to prioritize this offseason is figuring out that second line with John Tavares and William Nylander. If you're looking at the advanced analytics for those 2 guys together over the last couple of years, they've been fairly effective. But if you're just looking at the actual goals for and goals against, they're about breaking even. And that's extremely disappointing, especially when you consider that it's Matthews and Marner seeing all the other team's best defensive players. Those are the numbers that they're putting up in secondary matchups. It's in an extremely small sample, but if you're looking at the numbers that Tavares and Nylander put up while playing next to Nick Robertson, it's a really encouraging sample, especially when you're comparing it to the numbers when they were playing next to Alex Kerfoot. He is a bit of a smaller guy, but he has a more tenacious side to him. And watching the games that he played for the Leafs last year, that was apparent. I saw a couple of instances where he just dumped a guy into the boards or dumped him into his own net. He plays feisty. He plays bigger than what he is, but can he stay healthy? That's a question. But 28 points in 28 games for the Marlies last year, 16 of them being goals. If you're comparing Nick Robertson's 20-year-old season in the American Hockey League to other players over the last 10 years to play in the American Hockey League is just 20 years old, in terms of just the points per game, he's in good company. Even if we're just looking at the guys below him on this list, sorted by points per game, guys who are 20 years old or younger to play in the American Hockey League the last 10 years, there's a lot of effective NHLers here. But I also think it would be a bit naive to believe that Robertson could just be the solution to all the problems that second line was having last year. I mean, he's a good, young, talented player looking to take a step forward in his career, but that would be best case scenario, and I just wouldn't bank on that. And Dubas talked about potentially going out and acquiring another top 6 forward who's just tougher to play against, another Michael Bunting type, but I don't know if that comes via free agency or a trade. I mean, it would be awesome to add another player like that to the lineup, but it would also just be cool if William Nylander could play the same way that he did for Team Sweden in a Maple Leafs uniform. And if you're confused as to what I'm talking about, there was a clip of him over a shift or two just hitting everything that moved. And it's like you're watching a different player almost. You know, if you can get him to bring that energy, especially come playoff time, it'd be a welcome addition. Moving John Tavares from the center ice position to the wing has been something that's been talked about ever since he signed this contract here in Toronto a couple of years ago. And with him turning 32 before the start of this upcoming season, you know, there were a lot of instances last year where he was caught as the trailer on plays, and it hurt the Maple Leafs defensively. But I don't think we'll see that transition to start next year, just because I don't think that the Maple Leafs have enough cap space to go out and find another second line center and still shore up the goaltending position the way that it needs to be. I think if that second line is still a problem by the time the trade deadline rolls around next year, I think that's when the Maple Leafs will look to solve that in either acquiring another winger or a centerman. We can definitely do a video another day looking at some forward options that the Maple Leafs could either acquire in free agency or through trade to help them shore up that second line. The last thing that I think is a priority for the Maple Leafs this offseason is their depth scoring. The Maple Leafs have a lot of money locked up into 5 players, and because of that, people will say that they can't afford proper depth scoring, but they had 6 guys score at least 20 goals this year, and guys like Engvall, Kasha, and Kerfoot were consistent contributors as well. You know, the 3 of those guys plus Bunting and Mikheyev combined for 86 goals during the regular season, but in the playoffs, with an actual goalie in the net, because the 2 goals that Mikheyev scored were on an empty net, those 5 guys just produced 2 goals, and that's not good enough. If you're looking at the Tampa Bay Lightning through 2 rounds of the playoffs so far, their leading scorers are Ross Colton and Corey Perry, and both those guys play on their 3rd and 4th lines. And in Game 7 against the Toronto Maple Leafs, it was Nick Paul who scored both of the goals for them. With Spezza retiring and Mikheyev, Blackwell, Engvall, and Kasha all needing new contracts, and Kerfoot possibly being in trade rumors this summer, the Maple Leafs could have a lot of turnover in their bottom 6, and I wouldn't necessarily mind it. You may scoff at the 4th line, but aside from Spezza, who had 12 goals, the Leafs really didn't get much from theirs all season long, and that continued into the playoffs. Guys like Wayne Simmons and Kyle Clifford are there to do a job, but so are Corey Perry and Pat Maroon, and those 2 combined for 30 goals during the regular season, and like we showed, Corey Perry is tied for the Lightning lead in playoff scoring. Maybe that's a bit much to expect, but the Leafs need more from their depth guys, especially when it matters the most. But that's going to be it for the video, guys. Make sure to like it if you did like it, and subscribe for more because more is always on the way. And guys, I'll see you again in the next one.